Hey, it's March 7th, 2018, and on this episode here, which is going to be one of two that I do today, I'm sure, because today's a really important day in my life, where it was 20 years ago, and at any rate, I'll probably be doing the part 2 of my journey in Mormonism today here. So, Haleigh Everts on Modesty. She was kind of outspoken, and I think she did a really good job in this presentation. She brought some issues up, and I want to address them. So she's talking about modesty in Mormonism and giving her views. So I took some notes, and I'm going to look at them, not where anyone can see, because I did it on my old phone. So, Mormonism is changing. Is it changing regarding modesty? Well, maybe it doesn't change that fast, but Haleigh made some statements that don't agree with my experience regarding teachings on modesty, but she's getting stuff straight out of a particular manual here called what is it called? Gosh, I swear I was looking at it here. Yeah, anyway, it wasn't for the strength of youth. It was True to the Faith, she said. I've never seen True to the Faith. Back in the day, I went to Bruce's Bible, as we called it, Mormon Doctrine, which has been a little bit maligned since Bruce repeated things that, Brigham Young taught and other church leaders taught, which suddenly were being denounced and renounced first week of June, or second week of June maybe, officially, 1978, when the boys needed a revelation to make sure the Sao Paulo temple was going to be operable and let Negroes enter in and be part of the temple workforce there, temple workers, because demographics in Sao Paulo, Brazil, would not have accommodated well enough the church's needs for temple workers, since anyone with one drop of Canaanite or Negro blood would not be eligible. So that's not today's thing, though. Today's on her talk on modesty. So I've got some notes here. Let me take a look at them, and then I'll probably take a look at some of the comments she got. I really appreciate the job she does on some of these, because she's honest, which is refreshing, and she really tries to do a good job. But they don't teach the same things, apparently, that I was taught back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Okay, Haleigh Everts, Modesty Notes. She says that there are no standards detailing lines of demarcation for what are considered short shorts or, dresses that are too short, that sort of a thing. She said, looking through all these official LDS materials, she cannot find something that says how short is too short for your shorts or your dress if you're a girl. And so then she goes on to cite how that really leads to some uncomfortable, some unhappy, some damaging experiences for girls going to church activities, and most especially, I think she tended to mention girls' camp. But not just girls' camp. You could be going to Mutual or whatever, and what's short for me, in my mind, may not be short for you. So she said there's not a line of demarcation, and that people are getting judged, and I'm pretty sure she's right, that people are getting judged. They've been getting judged for a long time. And so how short is too short? Well, is that up to the Spirit to guide you? So That's not the way that I recall things. I recall particular lines of demarcation being mentioned, actually. I'm quite confident that, girls were to have their dresses go over their knees when sitting, for the obvious reason that it blocks the view of what could otherwise be viewed if they've got something that doesn't block the view. That's kind of pretty obvious why that would be the case. However, she says there's nothing that's being mentioned now, and so I'll just take her on her word for that. Why would they not give that line of demarcation that they did before? Some things are ambiguous, like, form-fitting, tight. She says how tight is too tight, and then her definition of too tight is probably a lot less modest than mine would have been, because bottom line is, if a guy sees a girl and the curves of her body are being carefully outlined, then that's calculated in human physiology to elicit a hormonal reaction. So I don't think you have to be super immodest to be causing guys to think normal thoughts. But normal isn't okay in the church, and so I want to get into that in a little bit here too. Sleeveless, that's a line of demarcation. Girls can't wear sleeveless stuff, or couldn't. Okay, anything that showed any cleavage. Well, any, or how much, or does that get ambiguous? I had a pretty adamant stake president who we all thought was super righteous, and I think he tried to toe the line and do what he thought was right according to his indoctrination, and he had general authorities, apostles, and so forth in his upline, in his genealogical upline, and so he was very adamant, and this is something that affected my life, because we did have those kinds of lines of demarcation, and in as much as it was possible. And so she says she's not seeing that, so I'm saying that sounds like a change. Okay, and there have been changes in a number of things, because the unchanging God seems to keep changing his mind. That's why. So I'm going to be doing this, part 2 of my journey in Mormonism, most likely today. And so Haleigh talks about some of these things, and I was the dad of more than one daughter, and I became the stepdad of 3 girls, and one in particular was difficult for me with regard to the modesty, because she went to seminary, and I was driving her and my son and my son's friends, and I went to priesthood meetings, and our stake president said, "You do not let the girls out of the house dressed inappropriately, dressed not according to the standards which we give you." And they were pretty clear on these things, unlike what Haleigh says that she's finding now in church literature. So, anything sleeveless, anything showing any kind of, it didn't say turtleneck, but my impression was pretty close to that. And, I would find on the way to seminary sometimes that the dress standard was, that there's somebody, something being hidden by a shawl or the sweater, and then that was going to be taken off, and she was going to sneak her way in, and I was going to be in violation of my priesthood obligations, which I took seriously. And so we would have to go back to the house, wait for her to change her clothes, and make everybody late and unhappy. So, and then, of course, she'd tell her mom what a jerk I was. I mean, it would have been a lot easier for me to just say, wear whatever the heck you want, But I tried to do what I believed was the right thing, because that's what my stake president told us very emphatically in priesthood meeting. So I was trying to be a good, a good Mormon dad, a good Mormon stepdad, and it was a source of contention because this particular stepdaughter was given to the habit of using her mom as a tool against anyone that opposed her will, whether it be her sisters or me. So it didn't help things. It wasn't helpful. It made my life harder. Let's keep on with what Haleigh had to say. So there's people that are not these girls' parents. They're young women's leaders, chastising them, making them feel like trash, like a little hoe, because they wear something that's not what the young women's leader defines as modest enough. But Haleigh says that there isn't necessarily a demarcation of where that line is. So, depends on who's thinking it. Anyway, bottom line, I agree with Haleigh. It's none of the damn business of these other people to be giving trash to your children. On the other hand, if you are being told that it is evil to show your body, that it is evil to, have shorts that are, above the knee or above the mid-thigh or wherever they are, saying today. I mean, in the 1800s, what were they saying? Above the ankle? So, again, we've got the unchanging God changing his standards, because if it's different now than it was then, like with your garments not going down to your ankles or not being one piece, then the unchanging God is changing. Haleigh, how's that work? Are you aware that the Book of Mormon says that he has no shadow in changing, and he would cease to be God if he didn't, stand by his standards, that sort of thing? That's in the Book of Mormon. Okay, teachings about tempting young men with your clothing style. Well, obviously, Haleigh's pretty vocal on this usually. Actually, she seems to have toned down a little bit, in my opinion, from her previous video, because she was like, we can wear whatever the heck we want, and it's your problem, guys, if you're looking. She's kind of that way still, but she's also saying, well, it's about your intent. Well, a guy doesn't care what your intent is. If he looks and it gets him, because if it starts his engine, it doesn't matter what her intent was as far as the effect that it's having. So I'm not sure I agree with her on that. On the other hand, my whole perspective is somewhat different than it used to be on a lot of things with regard to the church, because I realized that this is behavioral control, mind control, and it's not good. I'm not saying that girls should go out and flaunt, but if they do, if they flaunt hard, then that can cause more results, and sometimes they're not good. She says that some people say, well, Islamic girls get raped, or she didn't mention Islam, but she said girls that only are showing their eyes and their nose and their mouth, maybe. So we know who they're talking about. And then in Islamic men, not all of them, but there's a reputation of extreme disrespect of women, and they seems like you hear about a lot of rapes in Europe and that sort of a thing a lot more now that the Syrian people have migrated there. Okay, so is God changing his standards on modesty? It sounds like it to me, because I was taught differently than she's reading in these books now. She mentions Heavenly Father's law of chastity. and how sacred our bodies are, and that sort of a thing. And I was fully indoctrinated in that. And of course, I was trying to protect the chastity of girls that I was the dad or the stepdad of by encouraging them to be modest or to do anything and everything to protect their virtue, because we are taught in the in Mormonism that it's better for you to come back in a coffin from a date or a mission or wherever than to come back having lost your virtue. And that's pretty steep, but that's the way it's taught, because basically sex outside of marriage is considered whoredom in the teachings of this law of chastity. And I'm wondering, where is this law of chastity in the Bible, Haleigh? Have you read about the law of chastity in the Bible? Because like I was saying in a recent video, I think there's close to like 1,800 pages between, Old and New Testament, maybe 13 plus 5 or something like that. Maybe it's 13 plus 4 or 3, I don't know. It's supposed to be easy enough to look. And I don't see this law of chastity. I see the Apostle Paul, the Saint Paul, whoever, whether or not he was a real character or not, say, flee fornication. That's about it. That's about it. In the Old Testament, there's no law of chastity. As I was saying and have said many times before, there's not a law of chastity there. There's protecting a man's property, which is his wife. And if she screws around with somebody else, then she is, guilty and should be killed, according to the Old Testament law, guilty of adultery. And supposedly the man should, but the way it reads, it looks like it's pretty much the woman's fault, just like it's the woman's fault for dressing in a way that tempts men, because it's your fault for tempting me, which is kind of something that Haleigh's bringing out there. So not much has changed with attitudes as far as whose fault it is. And I have to say that there is no law of chastity taught in the Bible the way it is taught in Mormon temples, which is that you shall have no sexual relations with anyone besides your husband or wife to whom you are legally and lawfully wedded. Okay? That's the way it is. And if you do, it's like the sin next to murder. So if you're, 18 years old and you're a couple and you engage in something that the church doesn't approve of, you're almost like Charles Manson or Adolf Hitler, or, because you've had intimate relations outside of what is called marriage. That gets me into what is marriage? According to the church, legally and lawfully. What does that mean? If you watch any of my corporate governance videos, you know that the cities, states, counties, the national governments are actually privately owned companies. So you're licensed as, you're being licensed to the state and to produce more chattel property for them, actually. And that makes it holy. That makes it special. That makes it pure. That makes it of the, the deity that the church claims to follow, because a privately owned company licenses your relationship? Seriously, can't you have your own commitments and contracts? And if you don't, did Adam have that? Obviously Adam didn't exist. According to Joseph Smith, he's the first flesh on the earth and the first man. We find those things in the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. And obviously, there have been people on the earth a heck of a lot longer than 6,000 years. So, unless all you Mexicans and anybody descended from American Indians came from outer space recently or something and didn't walk across the Bering Strait like 15,000 years ago, then the whole Adam thing being 60,000 years ago is obviously about as much of a farce as the fact that you same people that I'm talking about weren't washed away by the flood of Noah either. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been here for the fake news Lamanites to disappear into, right? Modesty and chastity. Yeah, well, you know, if a girl's running around in a G-string, she's going to get some looks, and she's probably more likely to excite more guys. Does that mean that she's going to engage in immoral conduct? It's immoral to have sexual relations outside of marriage, according to the church. When I think of the word immoral, I think of, like, you know, used car salesman or Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or, you know, Bill Clinton. That's what I think immoral is. Immoral is someone who's acting, you know, outside of the values of integrity. Immoral is having intimate relations with your next door neighbor's wife. If you're a guy, I mean, adultery is immoral. But if you're in a relationship, who says that the church makes these rules? The Bible doesn't even have this rule. I guess God forgot how important it was for about 1,800 pages. Okay? The only thing that really seems to matter there is adultery. Alrighty then. She says chastity lessons are always negative. Okay? But she found someone that put the positive back into it, who was basically saying that your body's like a temple, you know, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, is it? And so it says, is the temple good because it's pretty? Is the temple good because it's clean? No. That's like your body having tattoos. Who the hell cares? Which is not what we're taught by the brethren, and I personally hate tattoos, as if anybody cares. But does it matter if you're out of shape, fat, ugly, whatever? No, it's just the spirit. Your spirit is what matters. So my question is, when LeGrand Richards, as an apostle, was talking to the missionaries and told them, what would you rather do, marry a girl with a wonderful testimony or a girl that didn't have a good testimony, you know, that was really hot? And, you know, the answer that he gave after hearing some responses was, he said, if it was me, I'd marry the hot girl because you could baptize her and convert her, but that other girl, you know, she's going to be ugly no matter what. So this is what our, you know, the Lord's anointed was having to say, and that doesn't really seem to go along with that message that Haleigh was agreeing with. We do have self-worth attached to our looks, and, you know, whatever. I feel like Mormon girls especially have been made to feel shame a lot, and, you know, and that any kind of, you know, showing anything of their body or any kind of relations that they might be involved with is all nothing but guilt. So then they get married and they're supposed to do a 180 as far as their entire attitude towards intimacy. It probably causes a lot of issues in marriage, and I would imagine there are some psychologists and others, you know, marriage counselors, people that deal with people that have some of these issues, that have had a lot of conversations along those lines. Because, you know, sex is taught as being dirty a lot of the time, or here it's so sacred that, you know, and there's this image of, well, what's Jesus Christ going to say? Would you wear that outfit in front of him? She said, I'm cool wearing a bikini in front of Jesus. Well, what am I going to say? That's what she had to say. Things of that nature. But she also said that, you know, it's up to you if you wear a bikini or one piece, according to the church now. Wow, because that is definitely not what was taught when I was being taught these things, and when I was teaching lessons, you know, as a Sunday school teacher, that sort of a thing. I can't honestly say I remember a lesson about a bikini or not, but it was very clearly taught to us that, bikinis are out. Two-piece is out. It's not a debatable issue. I mean, that's a known fact. And here she's saying, according to what she's reading, and it looks like she's doing some homework. She's got a bunch of, links and references, and so I think she's most likely had an opportunity to see what's being said right now. And wow, that's a big change. So Jesus changed his mind again. Maybe he's getting with this style, huh? Or the times or whatever. I mean, we've got a changeable God on our hands here, people. It seems to me that modesty seems to be according to the current culture, because we certainly wouldn't have had that in the 1800s. I mean, people had to wear garments down to their ankles, like I said. Then they brought them up to this, around the knee area. It was below the knee. Maybe it's getting a little bit above the knee. Who knows? And modesty was never taught to me as having anything to do with your garments. Haleigh seems to think that there's a big emphasis on that, and I've never seen that. And I'd go out and play tennis or something, and my garments might hang out a little bit, I wore long shorts, but still, and I didn't worry about it. It wasn't about modesty. But then the hypocritical standard for guys not wearing a shirt, I don't know. I think it's fine to not wear a shirt. But maybe I'm not thinking, how that might affect a girl. And what's that based on? It's based on the fact that within Christianity and Mormonism, you're taught that, to have physical feelings is evil. It's of the devil, the flesh. The carnal, natural man is an enemy to God and always has been. And so we are taught that we are bad for experiencing normal thoughts regarding attraction or sexuality based on our physiology that the religions claim that God gave us as he created us. So he created us in a way that if you see, a very attractive girl, it would be normal for you to have mating instincts. It would be normal to have physiological responses and to feel like, wow, that girl's really attractive, But you're evil if you think that. Or, of course, we've got you just mustn't think of anything explicit. Unless, of course, you're in Latin America and they talk about the 5-second rule. You can look for 5 seconds, thinking explicitly about committing, fornication or adultery before you're committing a sin. No, that's not church doctrine, but I actually did hear that discussed in priesthood. And I was like, are you kidding me? So culture really affects things. Down there, everybody's like polygamous, basically. You got to have more than one woman. Come on, they would say. Well, at any rate, I think that the way that this is done is ridiculous. It's made for anything natural to be evil. It's the natural man. It's carnal, sensual, and devilish. And that's all mind control. That's all BS. You are what you are, and you're going to have natural reactions. You don't have to dwell on a thought. You don't have to dwell. If you're married, it's totally off limits in my mind to be, having thoughts about other women, checking them out, and that sort of a thing. That's violating your contract with your spouse, with your wife, if you're a guy, and vice versa. If you're a woman, you're violating your agreement to hold that person as your one and only that you are physically or mentally, spiritually intimate with. That's the way I view it, at least. I believe absolutely 100% in fidelity within a relationship. And when you've made covenants, whether they're in a temple or before a preacher or a justice of the peace or by yourselves in a garden, under a tree, anywhere, and said, hey, listen, I'm making an oral contract with you here and now, that's just as valid, if not more, than any of those others that are motivated and coerced through social institutions such as churches or privately owned churches or privately owned municipalities. I don't think that they cause any more. I think they probably cause less actual veracity of a contract. I think you need to make your own agreements and then keep them. All right. Using your bodies to have sex and have children gets you closer to God, is what Haleigh said. That's interesting. Seems to be an oxymoron as far as, Christianity's concerned. She says, okay, basically as far as, she says she wore tank tops and short shorts up until the time she went to the temple. So once again, that's immodest according to Mormonism. So she only sees that as part of the temple garment covering business as being important, as long as she feels confident about the way she feels good about it. So that does not go along with the teachings that it's your fault if guys are getting turned on. It doesn't matter what your intent is, in my opinion. Either it does affect guys or it doesn't, and some guys will be affected, if you're wearing a nun's gig, a hobbit or habit, whatever the hell they call it. And some guys, so people need to choose how provocative they're going to be. I don't think it's a great idea to be super provocative. And if you're married, definitely not. One gal made a nice comment in one of my videos regarding one of these videos discussing Haleigh's video, and she said, don't market or advertise what you're not selling. In other words, if you're married, don't be out flaunting, trying to get any more attention than you have to. I personally would try to block the view of my wife's body from other men, especially walking out of a marketplace, where guys were drinking outside. I'd just walk in front of her, then I'd walk in back of her and not give them any view, because maybe I'm just a jealous guy. But that's how I feel. If you're married, don't be flaunting it. And I'm not saying that she was. I'm just saying she's a pretty girl, and I don't want a bunch of drunk dudes checking my wife out. Okay, so Haleigh says it's nobody else's business. And, I think about home teaching. I think about the spy system. People might say, oh, it's not a spy system. People help one another. Sure, there are benefits, supposedly, from home teaching. Of course, you could pick up the phone and say you had a problem without having somebody come over every month, an assigned friend to give you some lesson that's a correlated lesson. I actually think home teaching is ridiculous. And the Jehovah's Witnesses like to do their spy systems too with the elders. And the more you learn about mind control, the control of people, and manipulating people's minds, the more you find things like standards of modesty. It's one thing to, run around in a G-string. It's another thing to tell people they can't have extreme styles of hair. I don't like tattoos, but whose right is it to tell somebody they can't have a tattoo or 2 earrings in the same ear, or purple hair? That's ridiculous. And look how cultural that is. Can you think in southern, you think you get a temple recommend in Orange County, and go into the Newport Temple to be a temple worker with like pink hair or something? I think not. But in Latin America, I've seen it. I've seen temple workers with like pink, purple hair and stuff like that. So was Jesus has a different standard there? Well, Jesus is a different color himself down there. You ever seen Jesus with a tan? Go down to Latin America. Yeah. Jesus is, he's lost the blue eyes. He's got brown or hazel eyes and dark hair and dark skin. I wonder what he looks like in Africa. Does he got a fro? Haven't been there. It's about marketing, people. Yeah, the more Jesus looks like you, the more you'll relate to him, the more you'll pay your tithing. So, Brigham Young taught us to be very concerned with what other people were doing. If they weren't faithful enough, he said to kill them. If they're apostates, for sure kill them. Because they're going to be in outer darkness forever and ever, unless they're, unless they're atoning for their own sins with their own blood. So you got to make sure you kill them. A lot of things in Mormon culture come from way back, and most people don't know their Mormon history that well. And now you're not endowed. What does she mean by dressing like a hooker? Alright. Already went over the bikinis thing. Yeah, that was a thing. When I was living in Latin America, we went to the beach and met up with a guy and his wife, who were also gringos. And actually, my wife wasn't a gringa, but she didn't have a tan either like them. I mean, she's not Mexican. So, she's not what would have been called a Lamanite. So, the branch president and his wife from Utah came to the beach, and his wife had a bikini on. And it was definitely, I don't know when they stopped saying bikinis were for the devil, but yeah. So I thought, wow, she's the branch president's wife, and she's not obeying the church standards. There was a definite standard, and she was disobeying it. And I'd see her around town, definitely not wearing her garments. She'd be wearing stuff that's obvious she wasn't wearing her garments. So I had to think, okay, well, these guys are like church leaders down here, and they're defying stuff. One, they're in a position of representing that it's true. So, you notice that. I'm not saying they're bad people. They were really cool people. But as I was, evaluating things in the church, I'd noticed people's behavior. Maybe I thought they were just Utah Mormons. Because, California Mormons are much more by the book than Utah Mormons sometimes, right? At least that's what people say sometimes. I'm sure it's not always that way. All right. The judging thing is pathetic. It's horrendous. And it's not just on modesty. I saw issues with that, where my wife was told there was no room for her to go to girls' camp, which was a lie. The Bishop Rick, he wasn't a guy in the council of Bishop Rick. His wife was the young women's president. She lied and said there was no room, so that my wife couldn't go. And they told lies about her daughters and said they were smoking weed and stuff, when they definitely were not smoking weed. But they had something else against them. So they just spread rumors so that, no one would be their friend. Yeah, that actually happened. We had a lot of nice people to us, but that definitely happened. So one of the big points of Haleigh doing this that I see is the fact that she seems to feel she's got a right to think for herself. And that's not Mormonism. Mormonism is you obey the leaders. And it sounds like they have made some things a little more ambiguous, but she wants to do what she feels is, healthy. And that's not Mormonism. So I say you're being a bit of a rebel there, Haleigh, which is totally cool with me, but it doesn't work for complying and obeying and serving without questioning those leaders. And so I think this is good, because you're heading in a direction where you're going to figure out that the church manipulates people through mind control. That's what you're going to figure out. You're going to figure out that these things aren't always consistent. When you see inconsistency in the perfect and unchanging God, that's when you say, hey, what's up here? How could this possibly be from a perfect and unchanging God that keeps changing his mind and getting it wrong way too much? He should only get it wrong 0 times. This is a 0 tolerance thing for God screwing up people. And this is an opportunity to notice it. So wake up, Haleigh. Let's have a live session. Your channel or mine. Any topic on Mormonism you want. She says, if you feel good and confident, okay, did that. If you disagree with her, okay, Haleigh says, if you disagree with me, that's cool, whatever, you're not right, I'm not wrong. It's like, whatever works for you, baby. And, that ain't Mormonism, Haleigh. That's not Mormonism. Mormonism is not whatever works for you. Mormonism is, this is what the brethren say you have to do, and if you don't do it, you're an apostate. You're in rebellion. I know thee now, thou art Lucifer, he who was cast out of Father's presence for rebellion. Rebellion, or lack of obedience, is like the cardinal sin. That's why apostasy is worse than murder. Jesus can atone for all kinds of sins except for leaving the church. Then you're toast. Because brand identity and brand loyalty is the most important thing in the gospel, not how you live your life. Jesus atoned for your sins. Just make sure you pay your tithing, for God's sakes. Make sure you obey the brethren. And apparently the brethren are changing the standards a little bit, because bikinis were definitely out, and over the knee was definitely a thing, and sleeveless was definitely a thing. And sounds like that's being relaxed, just like, there was apparently a memo that came out that said you can't do this and you can't do that. And, there were some things that were definitely taught as wrong. And then they came out with another memo regarding intimate relations between husband and wife, and then they said, well, I guess it's none of our business. Do whatever the hell you feel good about. So, does this sound like people that are in contact with the one true God? Or does it sound like a bunch of corporate execs parading as apostles who can't make up their mind, and then they reevaluate stuff and go, I think we kind of screwed up on that one? Like, I think we kind of screwed up when we did do a demographic survey in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and made it the first temple in South America. And then we find out that we're not going to have they're not going to have enough temple workers because we can't let the white Negroes in the temple. So I guess we're going to have a revelation, and I sure hope we have this before people find out that their patriarchal blessings are screwed up when they said they were going to have a temple marriage, and then they find out that they're great-great-grandpa was a Negro. So, and the patriarch was faking it. Alrighty. So those are some of my points. I think that it's a sick amount of control that goes on in the church in a lot of things, and give people distorted views in order to control and manipulate their minds. And I've seen it affect people in my family negatively, very negatively in some instances. And it's revelatory to view the changes in what is being taught by these men that claim to be in communication with the one true, unchanging, all-knowing God. As we listen to what Haleigh finds in the literature, if she's accurate on that, which is much different from what they were teaching a number of years ago. Well, folks, We'll take a little break here and then get into the heavy stuff, I suppose, on my story. Ciao. Haleigh Everts Came out.